Welcome to the 2020 Annual Conference of the Knowledge Platform for Security and Rule of Law. My name is Megan Price. I'm the head of office here. You might recognize me from other such online interventions as this morning when I popped up on your screen. I just want to say how excited I am that today has finally arrived. My team and I have been planning this conference and replanning this conference and replanning this conference for a very long time. But I want to take a moment to reflect on what this actually means for us as a team, but also for us as a community. Yes, it's been incredibly frustrating these past few months. So much contingency planning, so much reconfiguring on the fly. It's been stressful. It's tested our vision, it's tested our stamina, it's even tested our commitment sometimes. But I want us to draw attention to the fact that that's exactly what learning is. It's frustrating. It's a struggle. It's admitting that you don't know what you're doing and having the courage and the vulnerability to push yourself through that barrier. So let's harness the potential that this moment is giving us. And if I really reflect deeply on it, what better time for us to be learning, for us to be experimenting, for us to be pushing ourselves out of our comfort zones, beyond the status quo, to be using new tools, to innovate. Now is the time to do it. Let's seize that moment. Because if I'm honest, we're all flying by the seat of our pants right now. We're all experimenting. We're all making it up as we go along. But the positive side is that we're also allowing each other to do that. We're allowing for mistakes to happen. We're allowing for blunders and for failures. We're giving each other the benefit of the doubt. And that is the perfect environment for innovation and for learning. When else are we going to get that moment? I can tell you honestly, there would have been nothing else in the world other than a global pandemic that would have pushed us to be so innovative in trying to reach a broader community in this online platform that we've created for today. So in a way, I want us to acknowledge with some gratitude that this is the moment to harness that potential for innovation, and let's seize it. Now, you might also be thinking, well, I've created a very convenient space for some blunders today. Well, and that's inevitable. There will be camera freezes, there will be mics that are muted or unmuted at inappropriate times. There might even be parts of the program that we feel like our brain is freezing. It's all okay. It's part of experimenting, it's part of innovating, it is part of learning. But I also want to acknowledge that this is not the ideal time for learning for everyone. There are some in our community who are feeling less freedom, not more, less room for error, less room for maneuver. They're not feeling safe to experiment and to innovate. So for those of us who do have the luxury to harness the potential of this moment, let's commit to doing so in a way that assures and supports the ambition of all of our community for justice, for security, for rule of law, for human rights. With that, I want to point out that I use quite often we, us, community, our, and I realize that this collective phrasing might be painting our community with a bit of a monochromatic brush, and that's not my intention. But I do feel that it's important that we feel that we're in this together. And that's why I'm so excited that this online virtual platform, this virtual venue, this online conference is allowing us to expand further than we ever could have before. So I want to take a moment to ask you to look to just the right of your panel, and there's a poll there. I want to see who's with us today. How many of you have come to an annual conference before from the Knowledge Platform and Security and Rule of Law? How many of you are veterans? How many of you are old hats and feel like this is kind of your home away from home, even on the online space? And how many of you are meeting us for the first time? How many of you are newcomers to this environment? I'd like to see a little bit in the poll to see who is with us in our community. And while you're there, if you want to put in the discussion maybe a short introduction of yourself or where you're joining us from, it'd be interesting to know who is around the world joining us at this moment. All right, so once we've had an opportunity to go to the poll, I want to draw your attention to a couple more features that we've integrated into the platform. We really understand that the value of our conference every year is also the networking it creates, the networking opportunity that it creates. It allows our community to bump into old friends, to meet new people for the first time, to start new collaborations, and we wanted to try and recreate this as best we could in the online platform. So during the breaks, I really encourage you to use the meeting hub and the networking carousel. This will allow you to see who else is here and to make meetings, to either schedule them into your program or to spontaneously chat with a connection. So please go check that out, because one of the greatest strengths of our community is bringing people together and the power that we create when we're more than the sum of our parts. So let's harness that potential as well today. Now, for those of you who are newcomers to the Knowledge Platform, I want to give very brief nutshell introduction to who we are. And you can use this QR code if you want. You can use your phone to capture it, and it will take you to our About Us info page. But in a very brief a brief way of saying, we are a community of doers, implementers, thinkers, researchers, activists, policymakers, policy specialists, all focused on security and rule of law in conflict-affected settings. And our purpose at the Secretariat of the Knowledge Platform is to focus on supporting the learning environment for that security and rule of law community. And we do this by facilitating candid exchanges between perhaps sharp-minded but not necessarily like-minded community participants. We also try to identify and fill knowledge gaps. We really emphasize and value interrogating the assumptions upon which our policies and our practices are based. And we find it invaluable to connect our members to one another so that they can align their efforts and their resources. We also have a small grants facility that we use to provide seed funding for those potential promising ideas that we'd like to see taken up to the next level. So with that, please let us know from where you're coming from, and we're excited to have you with us. Now, when I talk about harnessing potential, one thing I really want to emphasize about today is that we've really tried to integrate design thinking into our approach. And I want to say that if some of you, design thinking might be new, it might be something that you've already heard of, it might even be something that you're applying in your regular practice. But for whatever the case, I'm going to give you a crash course because it will really help you get the most out of your sessions today. Now, the design thinking is an approach that we find at the Secretariat incredibly applicable and useful for addressing difficult challenges, and specifically challenges for security and rule of law. And for that reason, we're encouraging all of our session organizers to integrate design thinking into the way that they run their sessions. And I want you, our wider participant community, to be able to be more familiar so that you can get the most out of those sessions. So I hope after this brief introduction of the concept that you recognize its utility, that you take the opportunity to go investigate more. There are tons of online resources, people who explain this in much more depth and with much more eloquence than I can here. But I'm going to give you a crash course about what the purpose of design thinking is. And ultimately, it's about nudging ideas forward and harnessing the potential for moving from A to B with an idea. And it gives you we're going to give you a 5-step process for that. So what can we learn from the design thinking process? It's 5 stages of iterative approach and iterative design that begins with empathy and eventually moves over to scaling an idea. Now, I'm going to admit, there are lots of different ways that design thinking is described and captured. This is just one, and again, I'd encourage you to go learn more online. There's hundreds of free online resources about design thinking. This is the way that we're capturing it for today and tomorrow in the conference, and we want to kind of use this as a cohesive way for you to experience the conference. So we're going to begin with the first stage, which is empathy. And here we see how design thinking connects with the values of the security and rule of law community immediately. Because the empathy stage helps us realize that a solution is only good if it responds to the needs, to the values, and to the priorities of the end user. And it means that we need to, before we begin thinking of solutions, invest in understanding the problem and understanding it from the perspective of the people who are experiencing that problem most directly. What are their challenges? What are their values? What are their ideas, limitations, needs? That's the perspective that we need to begin with, and that needs to be at the core of all of our solution creation. And we need to integrate those ideas, those perspectives of empathy into the process of creating solutions. So by doing that, we hope that we can drive and motivate people to feel more committed to the solutions that come out of that design thinking process. So empathy is the first stage. The second stage is define. And that's about moving from that foundation of empathy towards a human-centered problem statement. And this stage is about that understanding, gaining that understanding, and moving from a place of empathy towards capturing the problem in a succinct way, in a way that is specific enough to focus attention and resources and energies, but also open enough to allow for some creative thought, some creative problem solving. It's really about helping us move from simply having a sense of understanding the problem to being motivated to actually work on it. And it takes a harder and a more specific look at what are the facets and considerations of this problem. And it gives the person experiencing the problem, the end user, absolute primacy. So what we're looking for is a problem statement that is human-centered, that puts the person, the end user, at the center of the problem statement. And so we can carry that as we understand the problem through the rest of the design stages. The third stage is brainstorm. And this is where really you can allow for a cacophony of ideas. This is all about creativity. Here we want people to feel as if no is just simply not a word that exists. Every idea can be put on the table. Every idea is worthy of consideration. It's about generating the energy that comes from trying to break out of those status quo borders and barriers and trying to say, what could we possibly do if there was no holds barred? The fourth stage is prototype testing. Now here is where you have an idea, you have your solution and you think it might work, but we need to start thinking about being vulnerable and putting that idea out there and welcoming constructive criticism. This is a critical part of learning, and it can be a very uncomfortable part of learning because you've invested in something, you believe in it, and now you're going to ask people to show you what's wrong with the idea. And this is where it really takes courage and commitment to the understanding of the value of failure. Because when we fail, we learn. We fail, we try again, we fail again, but maybe we fail better. This is the commitment to iteration, to trying and understanding that all feedback given is an opportunity to improve and evolve your idea. So in the prototype sessions, we really want that critical feedback to come through with a tone of mutual respect and collaboration. And finally, the scale stage. Now, I'm going to admit that this is a stage that my team and I have kind of created and put together specifically because we feel that even though it's not part of the traditional design thinking approach, it does suit our community. Because our community of security and rule of law experts, oftentimes there are micro solutions or pilot projects that really show a lot of promise. But there's another stage that needs to take them towards another higher level of impact. But we want to express that this is also a point at which empathy needs to be integrated into the process. Who are the end users who are experiencing the problem most directly, and how will they be best served by expanding that reach? So it's really about what has been proven at the micro level and being prudent about whether or not it's worth the risk, because indeed there are risks of taking it out to the next level. So really understanding what is at stake. Not only what can be gained by scaling impact, but what needs to be preserved, and what are we at risk of losing by scaling. So these are the things that need to be considered for the scaling sessions. Now, I've given you a very, very quick crash course on how design thinking works. And once again, I really urge you to go online today, tomorrow, in the coming weeks, and look into it more. This can be a really interesting and helpful tool for working through difficult problems. And we at the Knowledge Platform Security and Rule of Law really embrace the idea that the design thinking principles evoke about empathy, about iteration, about embracing failure. And this is what we want to convey to you as our community to take forward in your problem-solving stages. Now, you'll notice in the program today that every session has a unique color. And this was not just for how it looks on the page, although we're very happy with the colorful program, but it's actually a guide. So you'll notice that light blue sessions, these are empathy sessions. These are the sessions that are trying to help create an understanding of the problem that reflects the end user, reflects the needs and priorities of the person experiencing the problem most directly. The yellow sessions are defined sessions. They're about working towards a problem statement, capturing that problem with a human center. The green stages, we don't actually have brainstorming stages today, but we're using the plenary as kind of an open forum. So please, if you want to brainstorm and think out loud, do it in the discussion box, because that's a great place to capture innovative ideas. And like I said, nothing's off the table. Then we have the pink stages. These are the prototype testing stages. So these sessions will really be about introducing a small, unique idea, putting it forward, and collecting from the community your input, your respectful and constructive feedback to try and see how we can improve that idea and move it forward together. Finally, the dark blue sessions, the dark blue stages, are the scale stages. Or are the scale sessions. These are the sessions where an idea has actually proven its mettle at the micro level, and we're now looking for an opportunity to increase the impact without losing what is good about the program. So these will be discussions about how do we scale, how do we grow, how do we do that responsibly, whether it means integrating conflict sensitivity or understanding the environmental impact of growth, really having a good conversation before we just expand. So, those are the stages of design thinking that I hope that you're able to take with you today as you go through the different sessions. I hope you're able to enjoy as many sessions as possible. I know we have a very full program. Some of the sessions do have limitations on how many people can get in, but always know that the live stream sessions can hold as many people. So there will always be a place to go throughout the entire day. And you can also join the meeting hub. With that, I am now going to turn over the plenary to our welcoming speaker, Ms. Mariette Schurman. Mariette comes to us from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and she is the director of the Department for Stabilization and Humanitarian Aid. So with that, Mariette, I'd like to welcome you. So, you might have noticed we had a technical hiccup. It's all part of learning. So we're going to have to skip ahead in our schedule a little bit, but I hope you don't mind. We are going to move past Mariette's address, but that's fine. You'll be able to see her in the following sessions. She's in 3 more sessions today. We're also going to skip over the address from Professor Ni Alain, but she will be actually live greeting us during the closing. So her keynote presentation is actually happening during the closing plenary. So I strongly encourage you to see her then. We'll post her 10-minute address, which was a pre-recorded address. We'll post that and we'll let you know where to find that later. We're going to move ahead in the agenda, and I'd like to now introduce Dr. David Mwambari from the African Leadership Center to provide us with the opening keynote. So, Dr. Mwambari, please.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Wherever you are joining us around the world, welcome to this session. I want to invite you to continue to think with me and Megan and everybody else about this idea of what is involved in design thinking. And so I want to encourage you to come with me, think with me, on what is involved. Now, I like to think that people and relationships for the people involved in the design thinking process are one of the most important aspects of thinking through a problem that you want to solve. And so my invitation is that we take this session as an opportunity to do self-reflection as we think of the problems. Now, to do that, I want to propose or request you that we think about certain groups of people that are involved when we are trying to design any project, when we are thinking of the problem that we want to solve and how we want to solve it, to think about the process. And to do that, I want to suggest to you that we have certain categories of people. One, we have people that we can label or call a seeker. So who is a seeker? A seeker is a person who is part of a community of real owners, somebody experiencing that problem. When Megan started her talk, she reminded us that we are living in a big moment, a challenging time. Many people who have been experiencing human rights abuses, who have been facing insecurity, are now faced with also a challenge of dealing with this COVID-19 crisis, whether it's social, political, or actually health challenges. And so even within our community meeting today, there are people who might think, yes, even though I am involved in this project design, even though I'm involved in this project, I am actually part of the community of seekers. But we do know that when we have a problem that we are trying to solve, we have a community, we have people at the end of the project who are going to be receiving those initiatives, those ideas. We want them to impact people in a real way and hopefully to change their lives for the better. So we can call those people the seeker. They're in that position of saying, I have a problem, I'm dealing with this problem, I am a real owner of this problem, and the problem they're experiencing is impact them directly. And of course, I want to pass my deep thoughts with those who are amongst us and who have already experienced a lot of challenges because of COVID. We know that these are tough times. Now, the second then kind of group that we can say exists in the design thinking process is a group of people we can call the beholder. So this is an idea advanced by Professor Fumio Nishakin to suggest that in peace and security and human rights project, we have people who are driven and they want to address a problem out of a sense of obligation or empathy. And these are good attributes because we are now in a global community that is increasingly becoming global. And for many reasons, many of us feel compelled to work on certain projects, sometimes even shifting career goals, to get involved in solving a problem that may be very far from us or indeed closer to our communities. But we can really honestly say we are not directly impacted by that problem that we are trying to solve. And so I want to say we can think of those people as beholder. Right. So if we have then seekers, to use Professor Olneshakin's word, really owners and beholders, then we can, my suggestion is that we have other people, whenever there's a relationship between individuals, there are also those who say, the younger generation will use the word, it's complicated. Now, there are also people where it's complicated. They cannot fit into the seeker or the beholder. It is indeed complicated because their relationship or how they relate to the problem is really on a continuum line. And this means that they might be experiencing this challenge directly, but at the same time involved in addressing it. Who could this be? This could be a local, if you want, a leader of an organization who is part of the problem and sees the problem and wants to take part in designing the solution. However, at the same time, the position that they're given, and think about the insecurity or these human rights abuses they're trying to solve, also puts them in a position over time of being a beholder. And so that's why we have this category that it's complicated. Because often in human relationships and in this globalized world we're living in, things do get complicated. And so now if you have understood, or if you have followed, if you have accepted my invitation to come with me, to think with me, then on this invitation to self-reflection, I want then to take a few seconds and request that you take this poll. In this poll, we want you to choose if you think, by my words, my examples, you think you're a seeker, you're a beholder, or indeed, it is complicated. And then towards the end of this presentation, I will come back to the poll and we will see, and also during the sessions today, you will be able to discuss what this means. Now, as you take the poll, I will continue for my next discussion. Really, many people know that power and what French and Raven call social power informs the kind of relationships and interactions that we have. I want to spend a few minutes reflecting on what French and Raven have called 5 bases of social power. To do this, you will forgive me, I am a teacher, and so I enjoy using examples. I am going to use the name of Tess to sort of show you somebody. You can imagine somebody who's in a headquarters office, managing a project. I mean, a real beholder, right? And then you can also think of Nasserian, a name chosen. I will bet you can find out where it's from. But Nasserian will imagine that she or he is based in a local office. So whenever I refer to Tess, you know, I am referring to somebody from headquarters, and whenever I refer to Nasserian, I am discussing somebody who might be a seeker, or well, it might be complicated. Or indeed, they might evolve into a beholder. You know, who knows? You see how your discussion goes. So those 5 bases of social power, what are they? So the first one we can discuss is reward power. This is the ability to reward. So let's say Tess from headquarters office is in this design project. You are designing a project, you have identified the problem, and in the process of designing or implementing the project, they reward Nasserian. Now, both Tess and Nasserian are aware that there is a reward that is at stake. And so that gives power to Tess, but also brings in the agency of Nasserian. So that's reward power. Second, French and Raven call this legitimate power. And legitimate power is where we have a perception that Tess from headquarters office has the authority to direct Nasserian from the local office and basically send an email and give instructions. On a call these days, with online platforms, people are sitting together, designing a project to encounter certain security threat or human rights abuses that have become even more evident in some contexts because of the response certain organizations have given or states have given to COVID, to resolving COVID crisis. And so TESS knows that when that discussion is happening online, that TESS has this legitimate power to direct, to give instructions to Nasserian. And then there will be expert power as a third kind of way of understanding power, which is the perception that TESS and again Nasserian and those also who are in the community of seekers have that TESS has expert, that she or he is an expert, okay, in a way that Nasserian does not. And then we have coercive power, which is the ability to punish. So it can come in strong language, but it can also be sort of within a thinking of discipline. You know, if you don't do this, you don't get that. And so there is a sort of coercive, with this, TESS has ability to punish using budget, using all kinds of things. And then we have referent power, which is TESS has earned, this is very important, on the referent power, TESS has earned the admiration and confidence of Nasserian, and there is a feeling of unified purpose in the problem that they are trying to solve. And so they then do what we call mutuality. So there is mutuality. There's a sense of togetherness on how they are trying, on how they think and want to approach this problem. So key questions that I would like to give you to think through during the day is, whose perspective am I prioritizing when I unpack this problem that we are thinking about? How do I build maturity, no matter who I am, a seeker, a beholder, or whoever it's complicated? How do I build maturity from my side? Whose agency should I respect in this process, okay, between the seekers and the beholders? What solution would I pursue if I had all the 5 social powers to see it through? That's a very interesting question. What solution would I pursue? And so what do you postpone in the thinking process? And then how can I explain this issue in a way that provokes empathy rather than sympathy? And there you can play with vocabulary when you're having a discussion and see what empathy means and the difference with sympathy. And then before now I conclude my talk, I want to invite you to reflect on that question again. Go back to the first question we asked. What is my agency, and whose agency do I prioritize, seeker or beholder? Aha, before I finish, our poll is in. We have 26% of people who think they are seekers, 29% who think they are beholders, and 45 think it's complicated. So complicated works here. 45% it's complicated, 29% they are beholder, and 26 are seekers. So remember, as Megan started saying this morning, empathize, define, brainstorm, prototype, test, scale. This is the thinking we are doing around design, and you can, again, as Megan said, you can research and find other ideas. Now, allow me to point to some sources for those of you who want to do more reading or more thinking around this. You want to read about mutuality? Please look up Cornell Michael, or think about French and Bertrand Raven's article. It's very simplified literature that I've chosen. And I have written about this myself on local positionality using case studies of project management in northern Uganda in a fragile context. And of course, cannot spend a better thing to read, very easy, very short, by Professor Fumi Olunishakin on measuring peace principles, practices, and politics. It's a review of the book written by Richard Kaplan that is very relevant to what we work on. So I want to thank you for your attention, and I want to invite you to continue to reflect on these questions, to add more categories. If indeed the seeker, beholder, and complicated think there is another category, I was just giving you some ideas to start thinking about you and others in the project. Remember, the most important thing is the people. Even if we fail at a project, but we succeeded at building relationships, that means we are moving, we are preparing for the next project which we can succeed. Enjoy the conference. Again, for those of you who are struggling because of COVID, please be with us, and we empathize and we think about you in this process. But at the same time, let us work together to find solutions and to build meaningful relationships that will solve problems in a practical way. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. I could not have expected a better way of calling to action for today. I'm extremely excited to be able to kick off the conference and going forward. So we have right now about a half an hour break. I encourage you again to go to your networking carousels, see who else is here, go to the meeting hub, make connections with other people, take David's words with you as you go through the sessions today. The next sessions will begin at 10:45. Wanted to check that. That's local time. And so please make sure that you join your sessions on time. There'll be some that are a mix of there'll be some that are live stream, that'll be here. There'll be others that are webinars, so they'll be in more of your familiar Zoom environment. And I just encourage you to take the words from the addresses this morning with you and think about how the design thinking approach can serve you in these sessions. And I really want to touch on something that David said because I found it quite provocative. There is a very important difference between empathy and sympathy. Sympathy is simply perhaps feeling sorry for someone, those poor people. Empathy is putting yourself in someone else's shoes, and that is such an enlightening way to reflect on a problem. So I would strongly encourage us to move away from sympathy and really put ourselves in the challenging position of trying to take on the perspective of another person. I think that's the best way for us to grow today, and it's the best way for us to kick off a design thinking approach. So let's harness the potential of today, and I look forward to seeing you in the sessions going forward.